This world, as we know it, was created by Big News Morgans, and we didn't even know that he existed until over 860 chapters into the series. There is no other character in One Piece with more power than Morgans. There is no one else who can crown a pirate king, cause a God Valley incident, and create the worst generation as we know them. Big News Morgans is the closest thing that One Piece has to an in-world author, and his presence is felt as early as East Blue, as it was a news coup who carried Luffy's first bounty after Nami complained about the World Economic Journal raising their prices. Greedy bird. This seems rather innocent and, dare I say, quirky at the time, but what it displayed is that Morgans has a reach so far and wide to be able to stick his bird hand into the very sticks of East Blue. And this reach is because Morgans has domain over the sky. There's only a rare few who have access to the sky, like the scientists of Weatheria or Shiki when he is canon with his float powers, and the world government certainly has no dominion in the sky, meaning that Morgans practically has a monopoly of this sky communication network. And as a result, everybody, and I mean everybody, reads the World Economic Journal. Civilians, pirates, revolutionaries, marines, emperors, etc., which means that almost everyone sees the world through the lens that Big News Morgans creates. I may be a money-hungry Scrooge, but first and foremost, I'm a journalist. As the DJ of the printed page, I get people's hearts dancing, and I'm the one who decides what news is fit to print. And Morgans describing himself as a DJ is perfect. DJing is, I think, seen as quite a lazy profession, and some DJs are pretty lazy. I mean, how much easier could life be than just hitting a play button and starting the musics? But there is so much more to it than that. A good DJ doesn't just whack a playlist together. A good DJ has to be able to read the hearts and minds of the crowd, to match their energy, hit the right highs at the right time, and to create a seamless journey through music. That is exactly what Morgans does with the printed page, and on a much more massive scale than any DJ could ever accomplish, because Morgans has to be able to read the hearts and minds of the entire planet. And to give you but a taste of the terror that Morgans has unleashed, we should go ahead and start right at the beginning. The very first page of One Piece, the famous words of the wealth, fame, power, the description of Roger as the Pirate King, Gold Roger I should say. These are the most famous words in the entire series, and they were written by Big News Morgans, which we would not discover until chapter 968, where Rayleigh is reading the World Economic Journal, and Morgan's article is saying, "The man who achieved wealth, fame, and power. The Pirate King, Gold Roger." And it's not just the iconic wealth, fame, and power line, because just let this sink in, Morgans is also the one who chose to give Roger the title of Pirate King, something that even Roger is surprised by. He says, "Hey, that's Gold D, Roger, but I gotta say, Pirate King, it has a nice ring to it," confirming that this is a new term to Roger. It's not an idea that anyone was actively seeking until Roger found Laugh Tale and became the first known person to successfully circumnavigate the globe. And Morgan, sensing that this could stir the hearts and minds of the people, he gave Roger a rewarding title, something that the world had never heard or considered until Morgans printed it. And those two words, Pirate King, are now the driving force of each and every seriously active pirate to this very day. And one can argue that Morgans is every bit as responsible for the golden age of piracy as Roger was, because the Marines may have given Roger his execution platform, but Morgans gave Roger's ideology a platform. And not only that, but he was able to mold it into a very concise two-word mantra that would fuel the coming decades. However, the reason why Morgans used gold instead of gold was likely a concession made to the world government. As in an example that we'll explore in a bit, Morgans was asked to remove the D from Luffy's name, which he did not, and we'll get to that. But to step back a bit, the first time that the world seems to have encountered the unfathomable power of Big News Morgans was 38 years ago during the God Valley incident. In fact, not during, just before it. As a tech-savvy slave girl named Ginny was able to transmit information about the prizes of the native hunting contest that would shortly take place on the island. These prizes include wildly rare devil fruit such as Kaido and Kuma's future abilities, but most importantly, the grand prize, Shaki, a former empress of Amazon Lily, whose life would be awarded to the winner of the contest. This information was of the utmost importance to keep secret, as if Shaki's location was revealed, then it would result in retaliatory action by both the Rocks pirates and the Roger pirates, the two most powersome pirate crews at the time, as Shaki was a precious inhabitant of Hachinosu, the island governed by Roxy Zebek, and she was also the love interest of Roger's first mate Silvers Ray Lee, an imagined love interest of Roger himself. Ginny was hoping that her transmission would reach the entire world, and then to inspire an untold quantity of pirates to flock to the island to cause all sorts of chaoses. However, this transmission was only heard by two groups. The first was Cypherpol, the secret police of the world government, and they were probably not going to broadcast it. But the second was a 15-year-old bird boy named Morgans, not quite yet of big news notoriety, but after this he would skyrocket into global relevance. Morgans then did something rather scummy, which was that he contacted Cypherpol in an attempt to extort them for some sweet, sweet cash money. An attempt that I believe was successful, and that sum of money is likely what allowed Morgans to buy the capital and hire a legion of birds to fully establish his newspaper business. But because this is Morgans, there's a twist here. Regardless of whether or not the world government paid him, Morgans still leaked this information directly to Hachinosu. Likely because Morgans wanted some big news to print by orchestrating a scenario where the Rocks pirates attacked God Valley. But also this showed some very early signs of advanced schemings from this Birdman, because leaking this information to Hachinosu, the pirate paradise, was also the fastest, most effective way to spread the information to all corners of the pirating world, which not only got Rocks involved, but also got Roger involved, and Roger's presence got Garp involved, which created an incident that would change the world as we know it. The God Valley incident had a litany of historical moving pieces that were integral to its chaos, but there is arguably no single person more individually responsible for this event than Big News Morgans. Without him, it just doesn't happen. The native hunting contest goes smoothly, and you know what, Roxy Zebek might even still be alive today, and we are looking at a completely different world. But Morgans leaked the information because he read the hearts of the world, remembering that Shaki was an idol so treasured by the planet at large that her disappearance initially halted all global economic activity for several weeks. So Morgans read this spherical room, and the way to win the hearts of his readers was to present a story about a bold rescue attempt of Shaki. And so that is what Morgans put into action. Although in the end, the world would never learn the truth of the God Valley incident, and the island itself, along with any trace of Roxy Zebek, would be successfully erased from history. Meaning that Morgans at this point did see it in his best interest to play along with the world government narrative, and to be fair, that also resulted in a great story as well. Instead of what actually happened, Morgans was able to publish the birth of Garp the hero, with his operation playing an integral role in creating the legend behind a man who is now widely considered to be the greatest Marine to have ever lived. But regardless of what the world knew about the actual truth, Morgans did still spark the God Valley incident, and so he changed the world through the means of information distribution. And as time went on, Morgans would either cooperate or rebel against the world government, depending on what it is that he thought would stir people's hearts the most. And a great case of cooperation would be the comic strip Sora, Warrior of the Sea, a World Economic Journal original project that used Germa 66, a fictional real-life monarchy that dominated North Blue as their villains, but also as veto of the fire tank pirate states. From what I hear, the story was based on the true exploits of heroes within the Marines. In other words, it was propaganda for kids. So this comic was designed to make the Marines look so good that kids would grow up and enlist, and Morgans was probably paid quite a bit for this propaganda. And this was world government propaganda designed specifically to secure the North Blue, to inspire people to join the Marines rather than support Germa. And this comic had such a profound effect that every male of a certain age from North Blue knows it, which is why characters like Trafalgar Law recognize Sanji's raid suit immediately as the stealth black character. And to prove that the propaganda did its job, Law stated that everyone in North Blue knows the series and that he hated those filthy Germa villains. And after Sanji uses his powers to spy in the women's baths on Wano, Diaz Drake and Basil Hawkins, who both also grew up in North Blue, instantly recognize Stealth Black as well, which shows us something rather sinister about the distribution of information. I think it's often assumed that there was only one edition of the World Economic Journal printed, because we tend to see people from all around the world reading it at the same time. However, the Sora comic strip was only printed in North Blue, which was done in an effort to undermine the German kingdom and to glorify the world government. So this was very localized propaganda, and it shows that each blue, the Grand Line, the Calm Belt, and maybe even the New World, all likely have these subtle differences in addition to carrying the universal big news. And that universal big news often includes new bounties. Bounty numbers are decided by the Marines, often calculated personally by common helmet or brand new, but what isn't decided by the Marines are the photos that are printed alongside the bounties. Morgans has a particular aesthetic authority that gives him an unparalleled power to portray these criminals in any way that he sees fit. He can make them look scary, he can make them look sympathetic, he can make them look heroic, he can make them look outright stupid, he can make them look like pets, like Chopper. And so having the choice of which image gets printed alongside the number is extremely powerful. And that is a large part of what has been Morgan's greatest project since crowning Roger as the Pirate King. For the past few years, Big News Morgans has been focusing on the next generation, as he stated to Stussy during Whole Cake Island. The way I see it, Stussy, in the near future, one of the worst generation is going to rise to claim the mantle of the Pirate King, which seems like a pretty bold prediction, but it becomes a lot less bold when you realize that Morgans is the one who gets to stack this deck and played a colossal part in creating the worst generation to begin with. Firstly, just like the Pirate King title, Morgans is almost certainly the one who coined the worst generation title as well, and the 11 supernovas, as they were originally known. We as readers called them the 11 supernovas at the time because that was the title of chapter 498. However, that term, which is also sometimes translated as super rookies, isn't used in world until after the Sabadi incident. Before then, they're just referred to as the 11 rookies with bounties over 100 million berries. Everyone on Sabadi knew enough to define them as a group, but they haven't been told what to call them or how to feel about them, because that is a job for Bird. Kid, Luffy, Hawkins, Drake, Law, you must have heard these names in the news. Information is a weapon. That quote was said by Shaki, who once had the entire world revolving around her, but Shaki only knows these names because she follows the news, not because she actually has any involvement in piracy anymore. So a large part of Shaki's worldview is now shaped by the choices of Morgan's. And a major part of why Shaki was such a big fan of Luffy before she even met him was because the reporting on Eustace Kid portrayed him as being too violent. And not a lot of fans actually know this, mostly because this was decided very retroactively, but Pre-Time Skip One Piece has an official name. The first half of the series is called Sea of Survival, Super Rookie Saga. Super Rookies again being the more literal translation of what we know as in English as the supernovas, meaning that Morgans named all of Pre-Time Skip One Piece. And in case you're curious, the second half of the series also has an official name, which is The Final Sea, the New World Saga, which I will say doesn't quite have the same zing to it, and I think that Oda may have wanted to consult with Morgans on that one. But in this way, Morgans almost acts as a casting director. He can't control the actions of the pirates, but he can artificially raise their infamy and give them more opportunities to act further, or to manipulate others into acting against them, to create fun storylines. Such as after Whole Cake Island, when Morgans, who was present at the time, wrote about Luffy's quote, victory over Big Mom, which made Charlotte Lin so furious that she very unwisely decided to set sail to Wano in order to get revenge on Luffy and to re-establish her dominance in the world. Morgans deliberately poked that very big mother, as so many have, hence all the children, but it's because Morgans wanted to spark another conflict to write more big news about. Meanwhile, reading that same article also had an effect on Kobe, who was brought to tears reading about the actions that Luffy sort of but didn't really carry out, because they were heavily embellished by Morgans. However, this inspired Kobe to keep on working and become better than he is in order to keep up with Luffy, because this is what a good bird-based storyteller does. He doesn't just create the hero, but Morgans is also creating antagonists and rivals for Luffy to collide with, and this whole endeavor has become one big audition process for Morgans to find his next Pirate King. And to continue with Morgans and his gift for creating striking titles, following Whole Cake Island, Morgans was also the one who labeled Luffy as the 5th Emperor of the Sea, which is a title that many in-world figures took issue with, and no one except for Morgans would have given Luffy this title at that stage in his career. But the way that Morgans framed it was that Luffy had just come out victorious in a direct assault on Big Mom. He successfully made it look like Luffy was already competing on the level of an Emperor of the Sea, which both we and Morgans knew was far from true. But here's the thing, Morgans has his own form of Gear 5th abilities, where he gets to reshape reality as he sees fit through his words. And it would only be a few weeks after this that Morgans would have the pleasure of crowning Luffy as an official 4 Emperor, in addition to Buggy, of course. But it's not just the world of piracy that Morgans has his eyes on. He's also following the Revolutionary Army much more closely than anyone else, and it can be argued that his reporting on them often serves to inspire other nations to revolt against their monarchies news to create more big news for Morgans to report on. And this dates all the way back to the very first appearance of the World Economic Journal in chapter 96, which featured a story about a successful coup d'etat having occurred on the island of Vera. And recently, Morgans did one very impactful thing for the Revolutionary Army, as following the reverie, Morgans was given a letter from the world government by Attach, a former world government photographer, containing a check with a bribe from the world government, asking him to cover up a particular story, which is very cool because in retrospect, this was a relationship established by Morgans extorting them on God Valley, but on this occasion, Morgans refused the bribe. And the story he was likely asked to cover up was the murder of Nefertari Cobra, with the alleged murderer being Revolutionary Army Chief of Staff Sabo. And it's in chapter 1054 that Kurouma comments on how this murder was so meaningful to the Revolutionary Army because Cobra was a Nefertari, one of the 20 founding families of the world government. We know that Sabo didn't kill Cobra, but it doesn't matter because the world now believes he does, which is considered to be the single biggest victory attained by the Revolutionary Army to date. Their movement is bigger, faster, and most importantly, more newsier than ever before. And it's primarily thanks to these choices being made by Morgans. But the impact of Morgans cannot be understated even when it's not his intention. For example, Luffy's 3D2Y message was only possible to create by using Morgans' network. A very wise former first mate and a very wise former warlord of the sea knew that if they created some tantalizingly big news, then Luffy's message would spread. And furthermore, the signal for the 8-Nation Revolution to commence was to hear that Sabo and the Revolutionary Army had destroyed the hoof of the Celestial Dragons, which was unknowingly facilitated by Morgans, who could not resist reporting on more big news. So it's not so much that Morgans is some omniscient story lord, and he can be used by anyone wise enough to understand how he operates, but surprisingly few people on this planet seem to be capable of doing that, least of all the world government, who really need to be. And for an example of this, following the raid on Onigashima, Morgans was ordered to print a new 3 billion berry bounty for Luffy. However, Morgans was also told to remove the D from Luffy's name and to not use the photo that Guernica took of Luffy's new Gear 5th form. And to these commands, the great and mighty bird said, "I won't let them manipulate this narrative. At moments like these, when the world is in flux, the straight facts are the most fascinating news there is." And there's even this panel of St. Topman Warcury losing his shit and demanding that the bounties be halted and reprinted. He is adamant that this image cannot get out into the world. And it's in this moment where we realize that even a man known as the world's greatest authority cannot command big news Morgans. This panel, quite frankly, is pathetic. Warcury looks pathetic. And Morgans may not realize this, but this decision has just revealed the sun god Nika to the entire planet. Anyone remaining who knows of the Nika legend has immediately recognized what Luffy is, just as the Giants of Elbaf did, but who knows how many other people there are on this planet who were patiently waiting for Nika to re-emerge and have now just seen him, and what they may be inspired to do from here. Morgans isn't all-powerful. He cannot create something from nothing. He can, however, significantly amplify or dampen whatever he sees fit. He has the power to sway the hearts and minds of the world, which is scarily close to the whole idea behind the sun god Nika. And whether Luffy becomes known as the world's greatest hero or the world's greatest villain will ultimately be in the hands of Morgans, who has flat out categorized Luffy as a villain at times, such as the Egghead incident where Luffy was blamed for invading and holding Vegapunk hostage, and likely his death as well. And the reason why Morgans did this was because of Shaki logic. Vegapunk was a beloved figure all over the world, so Morgans read those hearts and he needed to create a sinister villain to enhance the tragedy of Vegapunk's passing. However, if Morgans is just as in tune with the hearts of his readers as he's shown to be so far, then I think he'll be one of the first to realize that the dawn of the world is coming. He may have caused the God Valley incident, crowned the Pirate King, and created the worst generation, but the biggest news of his lifetime is still yet to be published.